My daughter-in-law forced me into a nursing home just so her parents could take over my waterfront estate. 2 weeks later, that singular act of greed resulted in her being evicted by a sheriff in the middle of her own party. This is a story about the devastating consequence of mistaking a father's silence for weakness. Before I reveal the secret move I made to destroy their plan, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And please subscribe if you believe that you should never underestimate an old man. Living in Henlopen Acres meant tranquility to most people who could afford the steep property taxes and the maintenance of these historic homes. But inside my 2-story colonial house, tension began filling every corner the moment they arrived. My home, with its bay windows and wraparound porch overlooking the Atlantic, had been my sanctuary with Eleanor for 40 years. My bedroom, where Eleanor's pictures still sat on the dresser, and her favorite sunflower yellow paint still brightened, the walls became their master suite within hours of their arrival. From retirement until that morning, I had maintained my independence and managed my finances and kept the house exactly as Eleanor and I had arranged it. I cooked my own meals and maintained the garden she had planted, and followed the routines we had established together over decades of marriage. Kendra immediately began rearranging everything. She threw out my groceries, calling them expired and unhealthy, and she moved my record collection to the damp garage, claiming it was dusty and outdated. She redecorated the living room with sharp modern art and relocated all my photographs to make space for her belongings. "Isaiah," she said, using my formal name like I was a child, "you will be much more comfortable on the first floor. No more dangerous stairs to worry about." But this was my home. These were my stairs. This was the bedroom where Eleanor and I had shared our dreams and faced our fears together. Every corner held memories they could not understand, and apparently did not respect. I felt like a stranger in my own house, watching my life being systematically erased to make room for theirs. Within 24 hours of their arrival, my house no longer felt like mine. Kendra moved through my rooms like a general inspecting conquered territory, making lists on her phone and rearranging furniture without asking permission. She started with the kitchen, dumping the contents of my refrigerator into garbage bags. "Isaiah, this cheese expired 3 days ago," she announced, waving a package of cheddar I had bought just 2 days earlier. "And this deli meat has so many preservatives you could die from sodium poisoning." I watched silently as she discarded groceries I had carefully selected, food that had sustained me perfectly well for 5 years since Eleanor's death. I have lived to be 74, eating what I like, I wanted to say, but held my tongue. Marcus was already walking through the house, talking on his phone about room arrangements, and talking to contractors about timeline estimates. "Dad," he said, returning to the kitchen, where Kendra continued her food purge, "Kendra and I will take the master bedroom. You will be more comfortable on the first floor anyway, no stairs to worry about, and the guest room bathroom is right there." My heart clenched. The master bedroom had been Eleanor's and my sanctuary for 40 years. Her photographs still stood on the dresser. Her books remained on the nightstand. Her favorite lavender sachets still scented the closet. It was where we had planned our retirement, where she had fought her final battle with cancer, where I had held her hand as she slipped away. "I am quite comfortable in my bedroom," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I climb those stairs every day. It is good exercise for someone my age." Kendra intervened with that patronizing tone I was already learning to hate. "Isaiah, you are 74 years old. It is dangerous to navigate stairs at your age, especially at night when you need the bathroom. What if you fall and break a hip?" "I have an upstairs bathroom," I objected, "and I have never fallen downstairs in my entire life." "There is a first time for everything," Kendra replied coolly. "Marcus, tell your father we are concerned about his safety." Marcus gave me that look I had been seeing more frequently in recent years, a mixture of pity and impatience that made me feel like a burden, rather than the man who had raised him, worked 40 years to provide for his education, and sacrificed to give him every opportunity in life. "Dad, please. It is only for a few weeks while we sort things out. Besides, the guest room is quite comfortable. You will have everything you need right there on the main floor." Comfortable was not the word I would use for the cramped space with its narrow single bed and outdated furniture. But I realized arguing was pointless. They had already made their decision, and my opinion clearly did not matter in my own house. I nodded reluctantly and began the heartbreaking process of moving my belongings downstairs. Every item I packed felt like a small surrender. Eleanor's jewelry box, the framed photos from our honeymoon, the books we had read together on quiet evenings, the small keepsakes that made our bedroom a reflection of our shared life. By evening, the master bedroom looked entirely different. Kendra had hung modern artwork, arranged her cosmetics on Eleanor's vanity, and moved my photographs to make room for her designer purses and jewelry collection. The living room now housed Marcus's laptop bag and business papers scattered across the coffee table where Eleanor and I used to share morning coffee. My teenage grandson Trey had claimed the upstairs office, transforming my quiet study into an entertainment center complete with gaming systems and speakers that thumped bass through the floorboards. The sounds of their music and video games replaced the peaceful silence I had treasured since Eleanor's passing. At dinner that first night, sitting at my own table, I felt like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. But the invasion was not just physical, it was an erasure of history. The next morning, I woke up in the cramped guest room with a stiff back from the old mattress. The light in there was gray and dim, blocked by the overgrown azaleas outside the single window. It was a stark contrast to the morning sun that used to flood the master suite. I walked into the kitchen to make my coffee, hoping to find a moment of peace before the house woke up, but the contractors were already there. 2 men in paint-splattered overalls were covering the hallway floor with drop cloths. "What is going on?" I asked, stepping over a roll of blue tape. Kendra walked in, clipping earrings onto her ears. "Oh, good. You are up, Isaiah. We are painting the upstairs hallway and the master bedroom. That yellow is just too depressing, and it clashes with our duvet cover. We are going with a nice neutral beige." Depressing. Eleanor had chosen that yellow because she said it looked like bottled optimism. It was the color of our life. "You are painting over the yellow?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "It is already done," she said, checking her reflection in the microwave door. "You will thank me later. It makes the house look much more modern." I stood there, gripping my coffee mug, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over me. They were not just moving in, they were scrubbing us out. The paint fumes eventually became too suffocating, so I headed to the garage, which was my secondary sanctuary. It was my workshop, my space for tinkering, and most importantly, my space for music. But when I opened the door, I did not see my organized shelves of tools or my carefully cataloged vinyl collection. I saw black garbage bags piled near the recycling bin. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tore open the first bag. My original pressings of Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk were thrown in there like common trash without their protective sleeves. These were not just records. They were the soundtrack of my life. I had bought that copy of Kind of Blue with my first paycheck from the post office in 1972. I rushed back into the house, trembling with a mix of rage and panic. Kendra was in the kitchen blending some green sludge in a high-speed mixer that sounded like a jet engine. "Kendra!" I shouted over the noise. "Where are my records?" She didn't even turn around until the machine finished its cycle. "Oh, those," she said, wiping the counter. "Marcus and I needed the shelf space in the garage for our overflow storage. Those old things were just collecting dust and mold spores. Besides, you can listen to all that music on your phone now. It is digital. You don't need the physical clutter." Clutter. She called 50 years of history clutter. I wanted to scream that you cannot hold a digital file in your hands, or admire the liner notes, or remember the exact rainy Tuesday you bought it at a shop in Philly, but I knew she would not understand. She saw value only in the new and the expensive. I spent the rest of the evening rescuing my collection, wiping down each jacket and stacking them in the corner of my cramped guest room because there was nowhere else for them to go. But the assault on my lifestyle did not stop at the garage door. It continued into the refrigerator the next morning. I woke up craving my usual Sunday breakfast: cheese grits, scrambled eggs, and a few strips of bacon. It was a tradition Eleanor and I had started before Marcus was even born. I opened the fridge and blinked in confusion. The shelves were packed, but nothing looked familiar. Glass containers of quinoa, plastic tubs of kale, massive jugs of almond milk, and expensive organic compounds I could not pronounce. I moved jars around, searching for my bacon, searching for my butter, searching for anything that looked like real food. Kendra breezed in, wearing yoga pants and checking her smartwatch. "If you are looking for the pork products, I tossed them," she said casually, opening a container of Greek yogurt. "And the white bread. And that instant grit mix. We are a clean-eating household, Isaiah. Your blood pressure will thank me." I stared at her. I am 74 years old, not 4. I buy my own groceries and I cook my own meals. "Not anymore," she said, tapping a spoon against her teeth. Marcus says your cholesterol is a concern, so we are making an executive decision. From now on, we all eat the same thing. It is just easier that way. She handed me a bowl of something that looked like wet cardboard. Here, try the overnight oats. It is good for your digestion. I left the bowl on the counter and walked out. I would rather go hungry than eat her charity gruel. By lunchtime, my stomach was growling, so I decided to make a simple grilled cheese sandwich using a loaf of bread I had hidden in my room days ago. I put my favorite cast iron skillet on the stove and turned the knob. Nothing happened. No click. No hiss of gas. I tried another burner. Dead. I checked the main valve under the sink, but it was locked with a padlock. A padlock in my own kitchen. Kendra walked in, sipping a green smoothie. "Oh, right," she said. I had Marcus shut off the gas line to the stove. "We are switching to induction eventually, but for now it is just safer." "Safer," I repeated, my voice rising. "I have been cooking on this stove for 20 years. Safer for who?" "Safer for everyone," she replied calmly, as if explaining rules to a toddler. "Elderly people often forget to turn off burners. It is a leading cause of house fires. We cannot risk it with the kids in the house." "So, I am not allowed to cook hot food in my own home?" I asked, feeling the walls closing in. "You can use the microwave," she said, gesturing to the device. "Or I can make you a smoothie. It is really better this way." I walked out the back door before I said something I would regret. I sat on the porch rocking chair, the one spot they had not touched yet, and looked out at the gray Atlantic water. My hands were shaking, not from age but from fury. They had taken my bedroom. They had trashed my music. They had thrown out my food. And now they had cut off my ability to feed myself. This was not a visit. This was not a family helping a grandfather. This was a siege. They were starving me out of my own life, stripping away my comforts and my autonomy layer by layer, until I was nothing but a guest in the house I paid for. I heard the sliding glass door open behind me. It was Marcus. I didn't turn around. "Dad," he said, his voice soft and hesitant. "Don't be mad at Kendra. She is just trying to organize things. She wants the house to run smoothly." I looked at my son. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, his eyes avoiding mine. He was wearing a shirt I had bought him for his birthday 3 years ago. "Smoothly? For who, Marcus?" I asked. "Because it feels like you are trying to smooth me right out of existence." He didn't answer. He just stood there for a moment, then went back inside, closing the door between us. That was the moment I knew I was entirely alone. 2 weeks of silence followed that confrontation on the porch. I learned to navigate my own home like a ghost, avoiding common areas when Kendra was holding court in the kitchen or when Marcus was pacing the living room on his phone. I spent my days in the cramped guest room reading books I had salvaged from the garage or taking long walks along the boardwalk to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. But the real shock was still coming. It arrived on a rainy Tuesday night, courtesy of my 19-year-old granddaughter, Jasmine. I was sitting on the edge of the narrow single bed, listening to the rain drum against the window pane and trying to ignore the muffled sounds of the television coming from the living room. There was a soft tap on my door, barely audible over the rain. I assumed it was Marcus coming to deliver another lecture about boundaries or electricity usage, so I didn't answer immediately. The tap came again, more urgent this time. "Grandpa, are you awake?" a voice whispered. It was Jasmine. I got up and opened the door. She was standing there in her oversized college sweatshirt, looking over her shoulder toward the hallway stairs as if she were afraid of being followed. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I stepped back to let her pass and closed the door quietly behind her. I was surprised. Jasmine had barely spoken to me since they arrived, usually rushing past with headphones on or disappearing into the room she shared with her little brother. She sat on the only chair in the room, a wobbly wooden stool I had brought in from the garage, and pulled her knees up to her chest. She looked young and small and terrified. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something," she said, twisting the strings of her hoodie around her fingers. "I overheard Mom and Dad fighting again last night. They thought everyone was asleep, but I was up studying." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "Fighting about me?" I asked, sitting back down on the bed. "About everything," she said, tears welling up in her dark eyes. "Grandpa, they are not here just to help you. They are here because they have nowhere else to go." The words hung in the damp air of the room. I had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed felt like a physical blow. "What do you mean nowhere else to go?" Jasmine took a shaky breath. Dad's consulting business went under 6 months ago. He invested everything in some software startup that crashed. They have been living off credit cards ever since, trying to keep up appearances. The bank foreclosed on our house in Potomac last week. That is why we moved so fast. It wasn't about your health, or the stairs, or your safety. It was about them needing a roof over their heads. I sat there stunned. My son, the man who lectured me about financial responsibility and efficient household management, had lost everything and lied to my face about it. He had painted me as the invalid, the charity case, to hide his own failure. But why lie? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. Why not just ask for help? I would have taken you all in. You know that. Because Mom is ashamed, Jasmine said, wiping a tear from her cheek. She cares more about what her friends think than the truth. She told everyone at the club that they were taking a sabbatical to care for an aging parent. You are their cover story, Grandpa. You are the excuse they are using to hide the fact that they are broke. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. They had turned my life upside down, destroyed my sanctuary, and treated me like a child, all to protect their fragile egos. But Jasmine was not finished. There is more, she whispered. And this is the part that really scares me. I leaned forward, sensing the real danger was about to be revealed. What is it, Jasmine? She looked at the door again to make sure it was closed tight. Mom's parents, Grandma Linda and Grandpa Richard, they are moving here too. My blood ran cold. The Robinsons. Kendra's parents were people I had tolerated for the sake of family harmony but privately despised. They were social climbers of the worst kind, people who judged worth solely by bank account balances and zip codes. Moving here, I repeated, my voice flat. Where exactly are they going to sleep? We are already packed in like sardines. That is the plan, Jasmine said, her voice barely a whisper. Mom and Dad are selling the Robinsons' condo in Silver Spring. They need the cash to pay off some debts, and the Robinsons need a place to live. They are planning to give them the entire upstairs, the master suite, the guest rooms, everything. And where does that leave me? I asked, though I already knew the answer in the pit of my stomach. Jasmine looked down at her sneakers, unable to meet my eyes. That is what they were fighting about. Mom has been looking at places, assisted living facilities, state-run homes. She says there just is not enough room for 7 people in one house, and since you are the one who needs care, it makes the most sense for you to go. Needs care. I did not need care. I needed my family to stop cannibalizing my life. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I could not breathe. They were not just mooching off me, they were replacing me. They were going to warehouse me in some facility so they could move Kendra's parents into the home I had built and paid for. When are they going to do this? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Soon, Jasmine said. Grandma Linda and Grandpa Richard are coming next weekend to see the house. Mom wants everything settled by then. She wants you out before they arrive, so there is no awkwardness. No awkwardness. God forbid the thieves feel awkward while they are dividing up the loot. I looked at my granddaughter, this brave young woman who had risked her parents' wrath to warn me. Thank you, Jasmine, I said quietly. You did the right thing telling me. She stood up and hugged me, tight, burying her face in my shoulder like she used to do when she was a little girl, and scraped her knee. I am so sorry, Grandpa, she sobbed. It is not fair. It is your house. I stroked her hair, trying to offer comfort I did not feel. Don't you worry, sweetheart, I said, my mind already racing. Now go back to bed before they catch you. After she left, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the rain. My sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My son was desperate. My daughter-in-law was ruthless. They were cornered animals fighting for survival, and they had decided that sacrificing me was their only way out. They thought I was feeble. They thought I was confused. They thought I was just an old man waiting to die. They were about to find out that I was still the man who had walked a 12-mile postal route every day for 30 years, through snow and heat and storms. I was not going anywhere without a fight. The morning after Jasmine's confession, I moved through the house with a new sense of purpose. I was no longer just the displaced grandfather mourning his lost bedroom. I was an investigator in my own home. I waited until Kendra took the children to school and Marcus retreated to the den he had claimed as his office to make my move. I knew my son better than he knew himself. Marcus had always been sloppy with details, a trait that used to drive Eleanor crazy when he was a teenager. He would hide his report cards in the bottom of the trash can, not realizing that I always emptied the bins on Tuesdays. Habits are hard to break. I walked out to the side of the house where the recycling bins were lined up. The blue plastic lid was heavy with dew. I opened it and started digging past the empty wine bottles and the cartons of expensive almond milk. It did not take long. Buried near the bottom inside a crumpled paper bag, I found a ball of paper that had been squeezed tight in anger. I smoothed it out against the side of the bin, my hands shaking slightly. It was a letter from a bank in Maryland. Notice of foreclosure. The words were printed in stark red ink that looked like a wound on the page. I scanned the document. The dates went back 14 months. They had stopped paying the mortgage on their Potomac house over a year ago. The amount they owed was staggering, a number that represented total financial ruin. I stared at the paper, feeling a mix of vindication and heartbreak. Jasmine was right. They were not successful professionals taking a sabbatical to care for an aging parent. They were destitute. My son, the man I had put through college, the man who had worn custom suits and driven luxury cars, was broke. He had dragged his family down with him, and now he was trying to use my assets to build a life raft. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my pocket. Now I had the weapon, but I needed to know the timeline. That evening I got my answer. I was sitting in the darkened dining room, ostensibly reading a book, but actually listening to the rhythm of the house. Marcus was upstairs in the shower. Kendra was on the deck talking on her phone. The sliding glass door was cracked open just an inch to let the ocean breeze in, but it also let her voice drift into the room. "Oh, stop worrying, Mom," she was saying, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. "We are on schedule. Yes, the room will be ready by the 1st, I promise." I stiffened. The 1st of the month was only 10 days away. I realized she was talking to Linda Robinson, her mother. "I know you need space," Kendra continued. "That is why we are giving you the master suite. It has the ocean view you wanted and the private bath. Richard is going to love the morning light." I felt sick. She was promising away my sanctuary, my bed, my view to her parents. "And what about the old man?" Linda must have asked, because Kendra laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, don't worry about Isaiah. We found a perfect place for him. It is a facility in Lewis. Very quiet. He won't be in the way. We are handling the transition this weekend." Handling the transition. Like I was a piece of furniture to be moved into storage. I had heard enough. I waited until dinner was over, until the dishes were cleared and the kids had retreated to their rooms. Marcus was sitting in the living room watching a basketball game on the massive television he had mounted on my wall. Kendra was in the kitchen pouring her 3rd glass of wine. I walked into the living room and turned off the television. "Hey," Marcus protested, reaching for the remote. "I was watching that." "We need to talk," I said, my voice hard. "About what, Dad? Can't it wait until commercial?" I pulled the crumpled foreclosure notice from my pocket and dropped it onto the coffee table. It landed with a soft thud that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "About this," I said. Marcus looked at the paper. For a second I saw the panic flash in his eyes, the terrified child who had been caught breaking a window. But then the adult mask slammed back into place. He picked up the paper and frowned. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice defensive. "Did you go through our trash?" "It does not matter where I got it," I said. "It matters that you lied to me. You didn't come here to help me. You came here because you lost your home. You are broke, Marcus. Why didn't you just tell me? I would have helped you." Kendra walked in from the kitchen, sensing the tension. "What is going on?" she demanded, looking from me to the paper in Marcus's hand. "Your father has been digging through our garbage," Marcus said, standing up. "He found an old letter." "It is not old," I snapped. "It is dated last week. You are facing eviction. That is why you are here. And now you are planning to kick me out to make room for Kendra's parents." Marcus exchanged a look with Kendra, a look I knew too well. It was the look of two people silently agreeing on a lie. "Dad," Marcus said, his tone shifting to that patronizing, pitying voice. "You are confused. That letter was a mistake. We sorted that out months ago. We sold the house. We didn't lose it. Do not lie to me," I warned. I heard Kendra on the phone. "I know Linda and Richard are moving in. I know you are planning to send me to a nursing home." Kendra stepped forward, shaking her head sadly. "Oh, Isaiah, this is exactly what we were worried about. Your paranoia is getting worse." "Paranoia," I sputtered. "I am not paranoid. I am observant." "Dad, listen to yourself," Marcus said, stepping closer. "You are imagining conspiracies. Nobody is kicking you out. We are just discussing options for your care because you are clearly struggling. You are forgetting things. You are mixing up dates. You are becoming aggressive." I stared at them. They were twisting reality right in front of my face. They were using my discovery of their truth as proof of my insanity. It was a tactic so cruel, so calculated that it took my breath away. They were not just gaslighting me, they were building a case against me. I am not the one who forgot to pay the mortgage for a year, I said, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. And I am not the one who has to lie to his own father to survive. Marcus's face hardened. That is enough, Dad. We will talk about this tomorrow when you have calmed down. Go to your room. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised to be honest and strong, and realized he was gone. In his place was a desperate stranger who would burn me to ash just to keep himself warm. I picked up the letter from the table. I will keep this, I said, just so I don't forget. I turned and walked to my small room, leaving them standing in the wreckage of our relationship. I knew then that the time for talking was over. The tension in the house did not dissipate after our confrontation over the foreclosure letter. Instead, it solidified into a cold, heavy silence that hung over the weekend like a fog. I knew they were planning their next move, and on Sunday evening they finally sprung their trap. Dinner had been a strained affair, with only the scraping of forks against plates breaking the quiet. Even the grandchildren seemed to sense the impending storm and retreated to their rooms the moment the meal was finished. I started to clear the table out of habit, but Kendra stopped me. "Leave the dishes, Isaiah," she said, her voice tight and controlled. "Come into the living room. We need to have a family meeting." I walked into the room that had been the center of my life for 40 years. They had arranged the furniture into a semicircle facing my old leather recliner. It looked like a tribunal. It looked like an execution. I sat down, feeling the worn leather conform to my back, and waited. Marcus sat next to Kendra, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, unable to look me in the eye. Kendra sat with her back straight, holding a glossy folder in her lap like a weapon. Dad Marcus began clearing his throat nervously. "We have been doing a lot of thinking since our talk the other night. We realize that things have been tense, and we want what is best for everyone. Especially for you." "For me," I repeated, keeping my face impassive. "Or for your bank account." Kendra placed a hand on Marcus's arm, silencing him. "Isaiah, let us be adults here. We are concerned about your quality of life. You are isolated here. You are clearly struggling with confusion and paranoia, as we saw with that outburst about the letter. We think you would be happier in a community with people your own age." She opened the folder and pulled out a brochure, handing it to me across the coffee table. The cover featured a smiling, silver-haired couple playing chess in a sunlit atrium. The words "Sunset Manor Active Senior Living" were printed in cheerful orange letters. I didn't need to open it. I knew Sunset Manor. It was a facility in Lewis that had been cited by the state health department 3 times in the last 5 years for understaffing and neglect. It was where people went when they had run out of money and family options. "You want to put me in Sunset Manor?" I asked, tossing the brochure back onto the table. "That place is a warehouse, Kendra. It is where they store old people until they expire." "It is a vibrant community," Kendra insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "They have activities. They have a library. They have medical staff on call 24 hours a day. It is not a warehouse, Isaiah. It is a resort. It is a nursing home," I said, my voice hard, "and I am not going. This is my house. I am perfectly capable of living here." Marcus finally looked up. "Dad, be reasonable. You can't stay here alone. It is not safe. Not safe or not convenient," I shot back. "Let us be honest, son. You need this house for Kendra's parents. You need the second floor because you promised it to them, and I am just in the way." Marcus's face flushed a deep red. "This has nothing to do with Linda and Richard," he lied. "This is about your decline. You are forgetting to turn off the stove. You are hoarding trash in your room. You are becoming aggressive with family members. We cannot provide the level of care you need while managing our own lives." I looked at them both. They had rehearsed this. They had built a narrative where my independence was actually danger, and my awareness was actually paranoia. They were rewriting my reality to suit their needs. "I am not going anywhere," I said firmly. "I own this house. I pay the taxes. I pay the utilities. You are guests here. If anyone is leaving, it is you." The room went deadly silent. Kendra's eyes narrowed into slits. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was ice cold. "We didn't want to do this, Isaiah. We wanted you to make the right choice voluntarily. But if you are going to be difficult, we have other options." "What options?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Marcus looked at the floor, studying the pattern of the rug. "Dad, if we have to, we will petition the court for guardianship. We have already spoken to a lawyer. Given your recent behavior, the gas incident, the hoarding, the paranoia about conspiracies, it would not be difficult to show that you lack the capacity to make your own decisions. I stared at my son in horror. He was threatening to strip me of my legal rights. He was threatening to declare me incompetent to take control of my life and my assets. If the court grants us conservatorship, Kendra added, smoothing her skirt, we will have the authority to place you in a facility for your own safety anyway. And it might not be one as nice as Sunset Manor. It is better if you go willingly, Isaiah. It looks better for everyone. The trap snapped shut. I saw the situation with terrifying clarity. If I stayed and fought, they would drag me through a legal nightmare. They would use their lies to paint me as senile. They would bring doctors and lawyers into this house and dissect my brain. And while that battle raged, they would still be living here, controlling my food, cutting off my phone, monitoring my every move. I would be a prisoner in my own home, watching them dismantle my life piece by piece. But if I left, I would be outside their immediate control. They would think they had won. They would lower their guard. And most importantly, I would be free to act without them watching over my shoulder. I looked at the brochure on the table. Sunset Manor. It was a hellhole, but it was a hellhole with a phone and an exit. I looked at Marcus. He was still staring at the rug, ashamed but determined. I looked at Kendra. She was watching me with the predatory gaze of a winner waiting for the surrender. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumple into an expression of defeat. I exhaled a long, shaky breath. You would really do that to me? I asked, my voice trembling just enough. You would take me to court. We don't want to, Dad, Marcus mumbled. But we will if we have to. Fine, I whispered. I lowered my head so they could not see the fire in my eyes. You win. I don't have the energy to fight you in court. If you think it is best, I will go. The tension in the room broke instantly. Kendra let out a sigh of relief and actually smiled. Oh, Isaiah, thank you. You are making the right decision. You are going to love it there. You really are. Marcus looked relieved too, though the guilt was still etched around his eyes. We will help you pack, Dad. We can take you over there on Friday. That gives us a few days to get everything sorted. Friday, I said, nodding slowly. Friday is fine. I stood up, moving slowly like the old broken man they believed me to be. I'm going to bed now. I am very tired. I walked out of the living room, leaving them to celebrate their victory. I climbed the stairs to the guest room, one slow step at a time. But inside, my mind was racing. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had solved the problem of Isaiah Vance. They had no idea that by sending me away, they were giving me the very weapon I needed to destroy them. I was not going to Sunset Manor to die. I was going there to plan my war. Friday morning arrived with a slate-gray sky that seemed to weep for what was about to happen. I packed my life into 2 cardboard boxes and a single suitcase because Kendra had decreed that anything more would be clutter in my new accommodations. The drive to Sunset Manor took 30 minutes. It was a silent funeral procession for my independence. I sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's SUV, watching the familiar landmarks of Rehoboth Beach blur past the window. The boardwalk where I used to buy saltwater taffy for Eleanor. The park where I taught Marcus to ride a bike. The post office where I had spent 30 years sorting mail and walking routes. It all looked distant now, like a movie I was watching from the back row of a theater. Marcus drove with a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, refusing to look at me. Kendra sat in the back seat, scrolling on her phone, the soft clicks of her typing the only sound in the car. She was probably already ordering the paint for the guest room or coordinating the movers for her parents. We pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Manor and my heart sank. It was a sprawling brick building surrounded by struggling saplings and a chain-link fence. It did not look like a resort. It looked like a minimum security prison disguised as a healthcare facility. The automatic doors slid open with a wheeze, exhaling a gust of air that smelled of boiled cabbage, industrial disinfectant, and stale urine masked by lemon air freshener. It was the scent of despair. We stood at the intake desk for 40 minutes while a tired-looking nurse processed my admission forms. She typed my name into a computer without looking up, reducing 74 years of life to a patient ID number and a dietary restriction code. Marcus signed the papers, his hand shaking slightly as he authorized the facility to take custody of his father. Room 304, the nurse said, handing Marcus a plastic keycard. 2nd floor, end of the hall. We walked down the corridor, passing residents slumped in wheelchairs. Some were sleeping with their mouths open. Others were staring at a television that blared a game show at maximum volume. Nobody looked happy. Nobody looked active. This was a warehouse for souls, a place where families stored their inconveniences until they expired. My room was a 10 by 10 cell with beige walls and a window that looked out onto a brick wall and a row of dumpsters. There was a narrow hospital bed with a plastic mattress covered by a thin, scratchy sheet. A small particle board dresser stood in the corner next to a generic armchair that looked like it had been salvaged from a waiting room in 1990. "This is nice," Kendra said, her voice bright and brittle. "Look, Isaiah, you have a private half-bath. It is very cozy. It is a cage," I thought, but I said nothing. I let them unpack my suitcase, putting my few shirts in the drawers and setting the framed photo of Eleanor on the nightstand. It looked small and out of place in this sterile room. "Well," Marcus said, checking his watch, "we should probably get going. The kids will be home from school soon." He looked at me for the first time all day, his eyes wet with guilt and relief. "We will visit soon, Dad. I promise. Once we get settled with everything." "I know, son," I said. "You take care of yourself." I watched them walk out the door. They walked fast. They walked like people fleeing a crime scene. I listened to their footsteps fade down the hallway, and then I was truly alone. I sat on the edge of the plastic mattress and listened to the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. It was a buzzing sound that drilled into my skull. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was my phone. I pulled it out thinking maybe Marcus had called from the car, maybe he had changed his mind. But it was just a social media notification. Kendra had posted a photo. I tapped the screen and felt the blood boil in my veins. The picture was of my living room. My recliner was gone. My rug was gone. In their place were color swatches taped to the wall and a bottle of champagne sitting on the mantel. The caption read, "So blessed to be starting this new chapter. Renovations begin tomorrow to welcome Mom and Dad to their new forever home. Family is everything." It had been posted 10 minutes ago. She had posted it while I was still standing in the lobby of this nursing home. She had not even waited until my body was cold to start dancing on my grave. She was celebrating her victory in real time, wiping away my existence with a filter and a hashtag. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. They thought I was done. They thought I was just another old man who would sit in this beige room and rot quietly while they drank champagne in my house. They thought they had won. I looked around the room at the peeling paint and the view of the dumpsters. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of lemon and decay. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "This is not where I end. This is where I begin." I put the phone back in my pocket. I stood up and walked to the door. I was not an inmate. I was a general in exile. And it was time to find my army. I walked down the hallway past the nurse's station, where a radio was playing low-volume pop music. I needed to find a place to think, a place that did not smell like lemon cleaner and defeat. I found the day room at the end of the corridor. It was a large, sterile space with linoleum floors and a television bolted to the wall blaring a soap opera. Most of the residents were asleep in their chairs or staring blankly at the screen, but one man stood out. He was sitting in a motorized wheelchair in the far corner near the window. He was African American with skin the color of deep mahogany and a shock of white hair that looked like a crown. He was not sleeping and he was not watching television. He was reading a thick, hardcover book and taking notes on a yellow legal pad. I walked over and stood nearby, pretending to look out the window at the parking lot. He didn't look up immediately. He finished writing a sentence, capped his pen, and then turned his chair slowly to face me. "You look like a man who just realized he walked into a trap," he said. His voice was deep and raspy like gravel moving over concrete. "I am Isaiah," I said, extending my hand. "I just got here today." "I know," the man said, shaking my hand with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "I am Otis. I saw your family drop you off. They moved fast, didn't they? Dropped the luggage, signed the papers, and peeled out of the parking lot before the engine even got warm. I have seen it 100 times." I pulled up a plastic chair and sat down. "Is it that obvious?" Otis laughed, a dry, short sound. "It is always obvious. The guilt creates a specific kind of speed. They run because they don't want to see what they left behind. But you, Isaiah, you don't look like the usual drop-off. You are walking fine, you are talking fine, and your eyes are clear. So why are you here?" I told him. I told him everything. I told him about the yellow paint in the bedroom. I told him about the foreclosure notice in the trash. I told him about the threat of guardianship and the lies about my safety. I told him about the Instagram post I had just seen celebrating the renovation of my home. Otis listened without interrupting. He sat with his hands folded over his book, his eyes studying my face with the intensity of a judge. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, looking out the window at the gray sky. "So let me get this straight," he said finally. "You came here voluntarily to avoid a court battle. That is right, I said. I didn't want them dissecting my life in front of a judge. Otis nodded slowly. And the house, the deed, whose name is on it? Mine, I said. Just mine. Eleanor's name was removed after she passed. It is fully in my name, and you have not signed a power of attorney giving them control over your assets. No. They wanted me to, but I refused. I just signed the admission papers for this place. Otis leaned back in his wheelchair and a slow smile spread across his face. It was not a nice smile. It was a dangerous smile. Isaiah, my friend, you are not a prisoner here. You are a man with a loaded gun who just forgot to take the safety off. What do you mean? Otis tapped his legal pad. I used to be a paralegal for 40 years. I worked in civil litigation. I know how these things work. Your son and his wife are playing a game of perception. They have physical possession of the house, so they think they own it. They threatened you with guardianship to get you out of the way, but they haven't filed the papers yet because that costs money and takes time. Right now, in the eyes of the law, you are just a man on vacation, a man who still owns a very expensive piece of property. But they are living there, I said. They are moving her parents in. Otis waved his hand dismissively. They are squatters, Isaiah. They are guests who have overstayed their welcome. But you cannot evict them easily, not without a long fight that you might lose if they claim you are incompetent. But you can do something much worse. You can sell it. Sell it, I repeated. The idea seemed impossible. How can I sell it from here? I can't exactly put a sign in the yard. You don't need a sign, Otis said. You need a broker who knows how to move quiet money. My nephew Dante, he handles high-end real estate in Rehoboth and Lewis. He specializes in what they call pocket listings, properties that never hit the public market. He deals with buyers who want privacy and prestige. But the house, I stammered. It is full of them. Dante doesn't need to show the house to 100 tire kickers, Otis explained. He just needs to show it to one serious buyer, one person with cash who wants the land and the legacy. And once you sell it, Isaiah, it is not your problem anymore. It becomes the new owner's problem. And if the new owner has money and lawyers, your son won't stand a chance. I sat there feeling the idea take root in my mind. It was nuclear. It would destroy my relationship with Marcus forever. But then I remembered the foreclosure letter. I remembered the lies. I remembered the way they had looked at me during that family meeting like I was a broken appliance to be discarded. They had already destroyed the relationship. They had burned the bridge. I was just deciding who would get caught in the fire. Can your nephew really do this? I asked. Can he sell a house with people living in it? Otis reached into the pouch on the side of his wheelchair and pulled out a cell phone. Dante can sell sand to a camel, he said, dialing a number, and he hates bullies almost as much as I do. He put the phone to his ear and winked at me. Hello, Dante. It is Uncle Otis. Listen, I have a friend here who has a very unique waterfront property he needs to liquidate. Yes, today. No, it is a special situation. We need a shark, Dante. A shark with a checkbook. He listened for a moment and then looked at me. Can you get out of here for a few hours tomorrow? I nodded. The facility allowed residents to leave for day trips if they signed out. Good, Otis said into the phone. Meet us at the Botanical Gardens tomorrow at noon. And Dante, bring the paperwork. The next morning I signed up for the group outing to the Rehoboth Beach Botanical Gardens. The activities director, a cheerful woman named Sarah, was delighted to see me participating so soon. She helped me board the shuttle bus, which smelled faintly of old bananas and diesel fumes. I sat in the back, clutching a canvas tote bag that contained my deed, my identification, and the few shreds of dignity I had left. When the bus arrived at the gardens and the other residents shuffled toward the tulip displays, I slipped away toward the south parking lot. A black sedan with tinted windows was waiting near the exit just as Otis had promised. The window rolled down, revealing a young man in a sharp suit with a haircut so precise it looked like geometry. Mr. Vance, he asked. I am Dante. Uncle Otis told me everything. Hop in. I climbed into the leather seat, which smelled of expensive cologne and success. Beside me sat another man older than Dante but younger than me. He was dressed in casual linen pants and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like they had done real work once. He had a trimmed gray beard and eyes that were warm but sharp. Mr. Vance, the man said, extending a hand. I am Julian Baker. I understand we have a bit of a covert operation today. I shook his hand. I appreciate you meeting me, Mr. Baker. It is not every day I have to sneak out of a nursing home to sell my own house. Julian laughed, a deep, resonant sound that put me at ease. Well, I am not your typical buyer. I am a retired architect from DC. I have been looking for a legacy property on the coast for 2 years, but everything I see is either a teardown or a glass box with no soul. Otis tells me your place has history. It has 40 years of history, I said, and right now it also has an infestation. Dante checked his phone. The coast is clear, Mr. Vance. My contact says your daughter-in-law just checked in at the spa in Dewey Beach, and your son's car is parked at his office downtown. The grandkids are in school. We have a 2-hour window. The drive to the house was short, but my heart was hammering against my ribs the entire way. When we pulled into the driveway, I felt a wave of nausea. The house looked the same from the outside, but it felt different. It felt hostile. We walked to the front door and I used my key, praying that Marcus hadn't changed the locks yet. The bolt clicked and the door swung open. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. We stepped inside. The silence of the house was heavy. I led Julian through the rooms, trying to ignore the changes Kendra had already made. The beige walls in the hallway, the modern art that looked like splashes of angry paint, the missing recliner. Julian walked slowly, touching the door frames and inspecting the crown molding. He didn't look at Kendra's decorations. He looked past them. He tapped a wall in the dining room. Plaster, he said admiringly. Not drywall. Real plaster. And look at these floors. Heart pine. They don't mill wood like this anymore. He stopped in the kitchen where the contractors had left paint swatches taped to the cabinets. They are planning to paint these cabinets white, aren't they? He asked, shaking his head. They are, I confirmed. They want everything to look like a hospital. Julian sighed. It is a crime to paint over natural cherry wood. This house has good bones, Isaiah. Incredible bones. It is crying out for someone who understands it. We walked out onto the back deck. The ocean was churning gray and restless, but the view was still magnificent. Julian walked to the edge of the railing and took a deep breath of the salt air. He looked out at the expansive backyard which rolled down toward the dunes. I can see why you fought for this, he said softly. It is not just a house. It is a piece of peace. It was, I corrected him, until they took it. Julian turned to face me, leaning against the railing. I want it, Isaiah. I will offer you full market value in cash. We can close in 10 days. No inspections, no contingencies. I can have the money wired to your account the moment the deed records. I looked at him. This was the escape hatch. This was the money to go anywhere, to buy a condo in Florida, to travel, to start over. But then I looked at the yard again. I looked at the spot near the dunes where Eleanor and I used to have picnics. I looked at the garden she had planted. I didn't want to leave. I just wanted the parasites gone. I will sell it to you, Mr. Baker, I said slowly. But I have a condition. It is a non-negotiable clause. Name it, Julian said. You see that flat spot of land over there, I asked, pointing to the southeast corner of the lot near the old oak tree. The carriage house spot. Yes. I want you to build a guest cottage there. Small, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchenette. And I want a life estate lease on it. I sell you the main house, but I get to live in the cottage for the rest of my life. Rent-free. Julian studied me. He looked from my face to the spot in the yard and back again. He didn't look annoyed. He looked intrigued. You want to stay, he asked. You want to live next door to the man who bought your house. I want to live on my land, I said. I want to watch the sun come up over that water until I die. And frankly, Mr. Baker, a house this big gets lonely. You might appreciate having a neighbor who knows how to keep the hydrangeas blooming and knows which way the wind blows before a storm. A slow smile spread across Julian's face. He stuck out his hand. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Vance, but I think I would like that. I think I would like that very much. We sat at my dining room table, the same table where Marcus had tried to gaslight me about the foreclosure notice. Dante pulled a stack of documents from his briefcase. We signed everything right there. The purchase agreement, the leaseback clause for the future guest house, the disclosure forms. My hand shook as I signed the deed, but it was not from fear. It was from adrenaline. With every signature, I was reclaiming my power. With every initial, I was tightening the noose around their greed. When we finished, Dante packed the papers away. I will file these electronically this afternoon, he said. Once the county recorder stamps them, it is done. The house belongs to Julian, and the current occupants become trespassers. We left the house exactly as we found it. We locked the door and drove away just as the spa appointment would be ending. When the van dropped me back at Sunset Manor that afternoon, I felt 10 years younger. I walked into the day room and found Otis still sitting by the window reading his book. He looked up as I approached. "Well," he asked, his gravelly voice low. "Did the eagle fly?" "The eagle flew," I said, sitting down beside him. "The papers are signed. It is done." Otis closed his book and grinned. "Then I suggest you get a good night's sleep, Isaiah, because the fireworks start when the new landlord shows up to inspect his property. And I have a feeling that is going to be a show worth watching." For 14 days I sat in that beige room and waited for the ink to dry. The silence was my weapon. I played the part of the compliant patient perfectly. When Marcus called me for his obligatory 3-minute check-in, I told him I was settling in nicely and making friends. When Kendra sent me a text message with a picture of her parents unpacking boxes in my master bedroom, I sent back a thumbs-up emoji. It was the hardest performance of my life. I had to swallow the bile rising in my throat every time I thought about Linda and Richard Robinson walking on my heart pine floors and sleeping under my roof. But I knew something they didn't. I knew that the deed had been recorded on a Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. I knew that the wire transfer from Julian Baker had hit my bank account on Wednesday, turning me into a very liquid man. And I knew that legally speaking, every single person sleeping in my house was now trespassing on private property. The timing of the revelation was Julian's idea. He had called me on Thursday, voice low and amused. "Isaiah," he had said, "it seems your daughter-in-law is planning a gala, a welcome home party for her parents this Saturday. She has hired caterers. She has rented a tent for the backyard. It seems like the perfect opportunity for an introduction." I agreed immediately. Why deliver the news in a quiet email when you can deliver it in front of the very audience Kendra desperately tried to impress? Saturday afternoon arrived with a crisp ocean breeze that rattled the window frames of Sunset Manor. I began to dress at 3 o'clock. I pulled my garment bag from the back of the closet where I had hidden it behind my winter coats. I took out my charcoal gray suit. It was the suit I had worn to Marcus's college graduation and to Eleanor's funeral. It was a suit for significant moments, for beginnings and endings. I polished my shoes until I could see the reflection of the fluorescent lights in the black leather. I tied my tie with steady hands, looking in the mirror, not at an old man cast aside by his family, but at a man preparing for battle. Otis rolled his wheelchair into the doorway, watching me adjust my cufflinks. "You look sharp, Isaiah," he said, his voice gravelly with approval. "You look like a judge walking into a sentencing hearing." "I feel like one," I replied, checking my pockets. Phone, wallet, and the copy of the deed folded neatly in my inside jacket pocket right next to my heart. "You go give them hell," Otis said, raising a fist. "Make sure you tell me every detail when you get back." "I promise," I said. I walked out of Sunset Manor for the last time as a victim. The automatic doors slid open and there it was. A silver Bentley sparkling in the dull afternoon light, parked right next to the facility van like a diamond sitting in a pile of coal. Julian Baker was leaning against the fender, wearing a navy blazer and sunglasses, looking every inch the successful architect he was. He opened the passenger door for me. "Ready for the show, Mr. Vance?" he asked, smiling. "Ready as I will ever be, Mr. Baker," I replied, sinking into the soft leather seat. The car smelled of cedar and conditioned leather, a stark contrast to the smell of disinfectant I had lived with for 2 weeks. We drove in silence for the first few miles, watching the scenery change from the strip malls of the highway to the tree-lined streets of Henlopen Acres. My stomach was fluttering, not with fear but with a cold, hard anticipation. We turned onto my street and I saw the cars. They lined the block on both sides, Range Rovers and BMWs and Mercedes belonging to the social circle Kendra so desperately wanted to join. We had to park 3 houses down because my driveway was full. I could hear the music from here, a tasteful jazz quartet drifting on the wind. It was the kind of music I loved, the kind Kendra had thrown in the trash because it was clutter. Now she was using it as background noise for her vanity project. We walked toward the house, Julian falling into step beside me like a bodyguard. I saw the tent peaks rising above the hedges in the backyard. I saw the caterers moving through the side gate carrying trays of champagne. I saw the front door standing wide open, welcoming everyone except the man who built the place. I stopped at the end of the walkway and looked up at the house. It looked beautiful, bathed in the afternoon sun. It looked like a lie. It looked like a stage set for a play where the actors didn't know the curtain was about to fall on their heads. Julian placed a hand on my shoulder. "Remember, Isaiah," he said softly, "you are not crashing their party. They are crashing your life. We are just here to correct the record." I nodded and straightened my tie. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the ocean and the jasmine blooming near the porch steps. "Let us go inside," I said. I walked up the steps, my shoes clicking loudly on the wood. I walked through the open front door and into the foyer. The house was crowded with people holding crystal glasses and laughing. Nobody noticed me at first. I was just an old man in a suit standing in the hallway. But then I saw Kendra. She was standing in the living room holding a glass of champagne high in the air. Her parents, Linda and Richard, were standing next to her, beaming like royalty. "Everyone a toast," Kendra announced, her voice ringing out over the chatter. "To my wonderful parents. Welcome to your new forever home. May you have many happy years here." The room erupted in applause. I waited for the clapping to die down. I waited until the room went quiet again. And then I spoke, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "That is a lovely toast, Kendra," I said, stepping into the room. "But there is just one problem. This is not their home." The glass slipped from Kendra's hand and shattered on the floor. The sound of breaking crystal signaled the beginning of the end. The silence in the room was heavier than the crystal shards glittering on the floor. Every head turned toward the foyer. I saw the confusion on the faces of the neighbors and the shock on the faces of Kendra's social climbing friends. But it was Kendra who recovered first because she was a professional at maintaining appearances even when the roof was caving in. She pasted a smile onto her face that looked more like a grimace of pain. She stepped over the broken glass without looking down her heels, clicking sharply on the wood. Her hands fluttered toward me like she was trying to catch a frightened bird or perhaps shoo away a stray dog. "Isaiah," she said, her voice breathless with a performance of concern. "Oh my goodness. How did you get here? Did you walk all the way from the facility?" She turned to the guests, widening her eyes in a plea for sympathy. "I am so sorry, everyone. As I mentioned earlier, my father-in-law is struggling with severe confusion. He sometimes wanders off. It is heartbreaking, really." She reached for my arm, her fingers curling like talons. Her nails dug into the fabric of my suit jacket as she tried to physically steer me away from the center of the room. "Come on, Isaiah," she whispered through her teeth, her voice dropping so only I could hear. "Let us go to the kitchen and get some water. We will call the nurses to come pick you up before you embarrass yourself any further." I didn't move. I felt like a statue made of iron anchored to the floor by the weight of my own dignity. I looked down at her hand on my arm. I looked at her manicured fingers clutching the charcoal wool of my best suit. "Take your hand off me, Kendra," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I spoke with the calm authority of a man who knows exactly where he stands. The room was so quiet that my voice carried to the back of the living room where the musicians had stopped playing. Kendra froze. Her smile faltered at the edges. "Isaiah, please," she hissed. "You are having an episode. You are ruining my parents' big moment. Just walk to the kitchen." Marcus pushed through the crowd, his face the color of old ash. He had seen me. He had seen the car outside. And unlike Kendra, he seemed to realize that something was terribly wrong. "Dad," he said, his voice shaking. "Dad, please. Let us just go talk in the den. We don't need to do this in front of the neighbors." I looked at my son. I saw the fear in his eyes, but it was not fear for my safety. It was fear for his own exposure. He knew the fragile house of cards he had built was starting to wobble in the wind. "I am not having an episode, Marcus," I said, clearly addressing him but pitching my voice to the room. "And I am not wandering. I am standing in the foyer of the house I built, greeting the guests who are drinking my champagne." Linda Robinson stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "This is outrageous," she declared, adjusting her pearl necklace. "Marcus, call the police. Call the facility. He is clearly dangerous. He just broke a glass. He could hurt someone." Kendra seized on this new narrative. "Yes," she said, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. "He is aggressive. We told you this would happen. He needs to be restrained." She pulled harder on my arm, trying to unbalance me, trying to force me into the role of the frail lunatic she needed me to be. She needed the audience to see a crazy old man so they wouldn't see the thieves standing in front of them. But she couldn't move me. I stood my ground, my feet planted on the heart pine floors I had refinished with my own hands 20 years ago. And then a shadow fell over her. Julian Baker stepped forward from the doorway where he had been watching the scene unfold. He was tall and broad, and his presence sucked the air out of the room. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked directly at Kendra's hand on my arm. "I believe the gentleman asked you to remove your hand," Julian said. His voice was deep and smooth like a cello, but it carried a vibration of absolute power. Kendra let go of me as if she had been burned. She stumbled back a step, looking up at Julian in confusion. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to regain her footing. "Are you from the nursing home? Did you bring him here? You need to take him back immediately. He is disrupting a private event. Julian smiled. It was a polite smile. It was a shark's smile. A private event, he repeated, looking around at the crowd. That is an interesting choice of words, considering that private events usually require the permission of the property owner. Kendra scoffed, rolling her eyes at her friends. I am the property owner, she snapped. My husband and I own this house, and we are telling you to leave and take him with you. Julian reached into his jacket pocket. He moved slowly, deliberately. He pulled out a folded document. He didn't hand it to her. He held it up so the light caught the official county seal stamped in the corner. I'm afraid you are mistaken, Mrs. Vance, Julian said. My name is Julian Baker, and as of 10 days ago I am the sole legal owner of this property. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. The first silence had been awkward. This silence was heavy with shock. I saw Marcus close his eyes as if he were waiting for a physical blow. I saw Linda Robinson's mouth drop open. I saw the neighbors exchange glances that said they were witnessing a disaster they would talk about for years. Kendra stared at the paper. She shook her head, a rapid, jerky motion. That is a lie, she whispered. That is impossible. The deed is in his name. She pointed a shaking finger at me. And he is incompetent. He can't sell anything. He is in a home. Actually, I said, stepping forward to stand next to Julian, I am right here. And I am not incompetent. I am just tired of being robbed by my own family. Fraud, Kendra screamed, her voice cracking under the strain of her unraveling reality. She lunged toward Julian, her hand snatching at the document he held. You are a con artist. You preyed on a confused old man. This is elder abuse. I will have you arrested. I will sue you into oblivion. Julian pulled the paper back smoothly out of her reach, his expression bored. I anticipated this reaction, Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice calm and level. That is why I brought a witness who carries a badge. He nodded toward the open front door. A uniformed sheriff's deputy stepped into the foyer. He had been waiting on the porch, obscured by the crowd, but now his presence filled the hallway with the unmistakable weight of the law. The room went deadly silent. Even the ice in the buckets seemed to stop melting. Officer Miller, Kendra gasped, rushing toward him. Thank God. You have to arrest these men. They are trying to steal our house. They have forged documents. The deputy held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. Ma'am, I have already reviewed the paperwork Mr. Baker provided earlier today. I have checked the county records. The deed transfer is legitimate. The sale was recorded 10 days ago. Mr. Baker is the legal owner of this property. Kendra froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish pulled from the water, gasping for air that wasn't there. But Marcus stammered, stepping forward, his face pale and sweaty. But we live here. You can't just kick us out. We have rights. We have children. You are correct, Mr. Vance, Julian said, handing Marcus a thick envelope. You do have rights. Specifically, you have the rights of tenants at sufferance. This is your statutory 30-day notice to vacate the premises. You have until October 15th to remove your belongings and surrender the keys. If you remain past that date, eviction proceedings will begin immediately. The envelope felt heavy in Marcus's hand. He stared at it as if it were a bomb. 30 days, he whispered. But we have nowhere to go. We sold the Potomac house. We put everything into moving here. That sounds like a personal problem, I said, stepping closer to my son. You should have thought about that before you tried to warehouse me in a facility so you could steal my bedroom. Linda Robinson let out a shriek that sounded like a siren. 30 days, she screamed, turning on her daughter. Kendra, you told us you owned this house. You told us it was a done deal. We sold our condo. We closed on the sale yesterday. We have to be out by the 1st. Where are we supposed to live? Richard Robinson's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. You lied to us, he roared at Marcus. You said the old man was signing the house over. You said he was incompetent. You said it was taken care of. We gave you $50,000 for renovations. Where is my money, Marcus? The guests were backing away now, shrinking toward the walls, trying to make themselves invisible. The party had turned into a crime scene of broken trust and exposed lies. I watched them turn on each other. I watched the family that had united to destroy me now tearing itself apart with the same ferocity. It was ugly, it was tragic, and it was necessary. Isaiah, please, Kendra sobbed, suddenly switching tactics. She reached out toward me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. You can't let them do this. We are family. Think of the grandchildren. Think of Jasmine and Trey. You wouldn't make them homeless, would you? You are their grandfather. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had thrown away my food, who had thrown away my music, who had treated me like a stain on her carpet. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a cold distance. I am thinking of them, Kendra, I said. I am thinking that they deserve to learn a lesson about honesty that you clearly never learned. I am thinking that watching their parents face the consequences of their greed is the most valuable education they will ever get. But we have nowhere to go, she wailed, dropping to her knees in a pile of confetti. We are ruined. Then you will do what millions of people do every day, I said, my voice ringing through the silent room. You will figure it out. You will rent an apartment you can actually afford. You will get jobs that pay real money instead of living on credit and lies. You will start over, just like you expected me to do at 74 years old. Marcus looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dad, are you really going to sell the house out from under us? Are you really going to take the money and run, to leave us with nothing? I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Run, I repeated. Oh, I am not running anywhere, son. I turned to Julian. Tell them the rest, Mr. Baker. Julian smiled. As part of the sale agreement, Mr. Vance has retained a life estate interest in a portion of the property. Construction begins next week on a guest cottage in the southeast corner of the lot. Mr. Vance will be living there permanently. The room gasped. Kendra looked up from the floor, her eyes wide with horror. You are staying, she whispered. You are going to live here. In the backyard. I am going to live on my land, I corrected her. In a home built for me. By a man who respects me. I will be here every day. I will be here gardening. I will be here watching the sunset. And I will be here watching you pack your boxes and leave. You are not just evicted, Kendra. You are being replaced. By me. And this time I will be the one holding the keys. The realization hit them like a physical blow. I wasn't just defeating them. I was witnessing their defeat. I was going to sit on my porch and watch the moving trucks take away their delusions of grandeur. I looked around the room at the shocked faces of the neighbors. Please enjoy the champagne, I said. It is excellent. And the music is lovely. But I believe the party is over. Come on, Julian. Let us go get some dinner. I have a sudden appetite. We walked out the front door, leaving the chaos behind us. I heard Linda screaming at Kendra. I heard Richard demanding his money back. I heard Marcus trying to calm everyone down. But I didn't look back. I walked down the steps and toward the silver car, my head held high, my heart light, and my future reclaiming its rightful shape. The 30 days that followed were not a grace period. They were a demolition. The facade of the perfect wealthy family did not just crack, it shattered into dust. The first casualty was the alliance between Kendra and her parents. Linda and Richard Robinson did not stay to help pack. They packed their own bags the morning after the party, screaming insults at Marcus in the driveway while the neighbors watched from their windows. They threatened to sue for their renovation money and drove away in a cloud of exhaust, leaving their daughter sobbing on the front steps. It was a harsh lesson in conditional love. Without the house and the status, Kendra was no longer the golden child. She was just another bad investment. The next casualty was the lifestyle. I came by the house every few days, ostensibly to check on the property for Julian, but really to ensure they were actually leaving. I watched the luxury cars disappear one by one. The BMW was repossessed. The Range Rover was sold to a dealership in Dover for quick cash. Kendra began listing her designer handbags on resale websites, haggling over $50 with strangers because they needed the money for a rental deposit. The house, which had been filled with music and arrogance, was now filled with the sound of packing tape and accusations. Marcus and Kendra fought constantly. Their voices echoed through the empty rooms, blaming each other for the disaster. You should have been smarter, Marcus shouted. You should have treated him better, Kendra screamed back. They were rats on a sinking ship, eating each other to survive. The children were the collateral damage. Trey withdrew, completely hiding in his headphones. But Jasmine was different. When I visited, she would sit with me on the porch, steps tired but calm. I think this is good for us, Grandpa, she told me one afternoon while Marcus wrestled a mattress into a rented trailer. We were living a lie. At least now we know who we really are. On the final day, October 15th, I arrived at 8 in the morning. I brought a folding lawn chair and a thermos of iced tea. I set up my station near the rose bushes and just watched. They could not afford professional movers anymore. Marcus and Kendra had to carry the boxes themselves. They looked exhausted. They looked aged. They looked like people who had finally learned the weight of their own choices. Marcus paused as he carried the last box to the U-Haul. He looked at me sitting there in my chair. He wanted to say something. He wanted forgiveness or money or a goodbye, but I just took a sip of my tea and looked at the ocean. He lowered his head and walked away. He climbed into the driver's seat of the truck and started the engine. I watched them pull out of the driveway. I watched the taillights disappear around the curve of the road, and then finally there was silence. The house was empty, the thieves were gone, and the air tasted sweeter than it had in years. 6 months later, the first blooms of spring appeared in the garden, marking the beginning of my new life. The guest cottage stood on the southeast corner of the lot just as I had envisioned it. It was a sturdy structure with cedar shingles that smelled of the forest and wide windows that framed the Atlantic like a living painting. I had my own kitchen, my own bathroom, and a porch that caught the morning sun perfectly. But the best part was the silence. It was not the lonely silence of the nursing home. It was the peaceful silence of autonomy. Julian proved to be a man of his word. He treated the main house with the reverence it deserved, restoring the wood floors and stripping away the beige paint to reveal the character underneath. We found a rhythm together. On Tuesday mornings we drank coffee on his deck and discussed politics. On Friday afternoons we worked in the garden side by side, two men with dirt under their fingernails and peace in their hearts. He was not just my landlord. He was the son I should have had, or perhaps the brother I never knew. The only link to my old life was Jasmine. She drove down from the university every other weekend. She had her own room in the main house now because Julian insisted she always had a place here. She told me about her parents. They were living in a small townhouse in Dover. Marcus was working as a junior accountant. Kendra was working at a boutique. They were tired and they were humbled, but they were paying their own bills. They were finally becoming adults at 50 years old. I didn't visit them and they didn't visit me. We needed the distance to heal. Or perhaps we just needed the distance to exist without hurting each other. I was sitting on my porch one evening watching the sun dip below the horizon, turning the water into a sheet of hammered gold. Jasmine was in the garden cutting flowers for the dinner table. Julian was inside playing a jazz record that drifted through the open windows. It was the same Miles Davis album Kendra had thrown in the trash. I closed my eyes and listened. I had lost the big house, but I had kept the home. I had lost the illusion of a perfect family, but I had found the reality of true friends. I was 75 years old. I had a lease that would last a lifetime, and a view that would never change. I took a deep breath, tasting the salt and the flowers. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. True dignity is not given to you by others. It is something you must claim for yourself. Family is not defined by blood or obligation, but by mutual respect and care. Never be afraid to burn a bridge if it is the only way to stop the enemy from crossing into your sanctuary. We often make the mistake of confusing silence with surrender, assuming that age slowly strips a person of their power. But as Isaiah showed us, dignity does not have an expiration date. The hardest battles are often fought not against strangers, but against the entitlement of those we raised. True peace is not a gift you wait for. It is a territory you must defend with iron boundaries. Never allow anyone, not even family, to treat your existence as an inconvenience. You are the architect of your life until the very last breath. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to stand your ground to protect your peace, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice and resilience.